Hello there, it's 3 o'clock on a Tuesday, and we all know what that means. Another edition of Behind Breaking Bond. If you have been watching us, you know that we're basically doing this to bring attention to the issue that is driving crime in Harris County, and that's repeat violent offenders being freed from jail by getting multiple felony bonds. Please introduce yourself.
Before I do, I've never realized this. When you said behind breaking bond, it's 3 B's, right?
BBB.
That's like we're like the Better Business Bureau of crime. I finally took me out.
We are going to be sued by the Better Business Bureau.
Hey, Andy Kahn, crime victims, and look, again, today's segment sponsored by Axe Grinding Fear Mongering Coffee. You got an axe to grind? Our cutting edge coffee is good.
To the last
axe. Remember, Axe Grinding Fear Mongering Coffee. You heard it first on Behind Breaking Bond.
It sounds like coffee. If you drank it, you'd be up for like 5 days or something.
I have to drink this to do this show with you.
Of course you do. Joining us, our guest today is April Aguirre. Tell us about your family tragedy. It's something that everybody that kind of keeps up with the news will remember.
Right, and my name is April Aguirre. I am Arlene's aunt, and I'm here on behalf of the Alvarez family. So our story is very, very tragic, and we no longer have a happily ever after. It's over for us, and we're hoping that after our advocacy, it won't be over for you too, the people that are watching. I don't wish this upon anybody, and what's going on right now to Wendy and Armando and the family at large is something that has no solution, and it's very tragic. Long story short, Arlene and her family was driving to Spanky's Pizza for dinner on Valentine's evening, and instead of my sister being selfish and just going out with her husband, she always took her babies everywhere she went. There was 3 kids in the car that night, 2 people in the front seat, Armando and Wendy. They started hearing gunshots and they didn't know where they were coming from. And Armando says that he sped forward and an individual started opening fire into our vehicle. It was a case of mistaken identity. The assailant said that he thought the person that had just robbed him jumped into our vehicle, but we were just driving down the road. So what I want everybody in the community to know is that you could simply be driving to dinner and somebody decides to open fire on you, just like the case with Jasmine Barnes. They also thought that they were shooting at somebody else, and that cost the life of Arlene. She was shot on the right side of her temple here, and she was resuscitated by paramedics, taken to the hospital, and after some exams, she was told that she was brain dead and that she wouldn't survive. And that's news that no family should have to hear.
You were at the hospital with her. Mm-hmm. I've seen the footage.
I mean, that could have been anybody that would have been at that in that spot at that moment.
Yes, and at that point, another point, it doesn't matter if you're black, white, Hispanic, Republican, Democrat, male, female, young, or old. There's no criteria for killing, and nobody asked us who we voted for. Nobody asked us what we believed in. The situation happened. The death happened. It was a murder. It was an assassination, and I compare it to JFK. They just shot into us. I mean, we didn't even know where it was coming from. And for things like that to be happening to children here in this community, and they continue to happen, this is not an isolated incident.
Right.
It's very sad because Harris County used to be a safe place to live. This is our home. I used to never see this on the news. You got into as much trouble as you wanted to in the past, and now crime is interfering with people's day-to-day lives as it did with us.
I mean, this is a 9-year-old that, I mean, she had a whole life in front of her.
She did.
And the idea for her parents not to see her grow up and what her life held, I mean, it's mind-boggling to even think that somebody would have to go through that.
It's terrible. And on top of that, she should have turned 10 this Thursday, and we decided to celebrate her birthday at her gravesite. And that was very tough to do, but we have to continue to celebrate her life. If not us, then who?
So prior to your niece getting tragically murdered, I mean, have you been keeping up with the crime?
Absolutely.
Have you?
Absolutely. So we saw everything play out on the news, right? And we were outraged, but we were at home and outraged, like, oh my God, did you see that? Another one? No way. I can't believe that. Look, Dad, look, Mom. And sharing it with all of our husbands and wives and sister-in-laws, right? We share everything. We have these group chats where we send each other everything. And you almost have this false sense of safety that
It's not going to happen to you. Yeah.
And we never thought that it would happen to this family, because Wendy and Armando are such wonderful parents that don't ever put themselves in a position to be in a dangerous place. You know, we thought we lived in a safe society. We saw the things happening on the news, but we never thought it would happen to us, right? And what's worse is that we get pushed into this criminal justice system. We don't know what we're doing, but we're trying to navigate it, and only to see how broken it is. The person that killed Arlene was out 22 hours after he killed her.
You became very vocal about the bond issue. Tell us about that.
It's a huge issue, guys, because there's no consequences, right? And we're talking about heinous crimes that take the lives of people that are life altering, right? Sexual assaults, aggravated assaults, manslaughters, murders of every kind. In this society, I just cannot believe that here in the United States, if you kill a 9-year-old, that you're out in 22 hours. And that's what dove us into trying to figure out where the breakdown is. And what we found is that there's a lot of breakdowns within the bail industry. People are getting rich off of innocent people and dead kids. Nobody should have made money off of my niece's death,
That's right.
but they did. They sure did. It's a lucrative business, and I understand why they're opposed to change, because it inflicts with their livelihood.
Right.
But nobody should be making money off of dead kids. So before we implemented the 10% minimum mandate for the 17 violent offenses, it was a wild, wild west. There was no regulation.
Yeah.
They could charge 1%, 2%, 10%. They could charge whatever they want or nothing. As we heard at the bail bond board in April, and if you guys want to check that out, you can, it's online. They began to question a bail bond company and agent, and she confesses to giving somebody paying no amount of money down, and they got out of jail just with her signing that piece of paper. And then they create this payment plan, and they start paying over a 2-year period or 1-year period. It doesn't matter. Bail bond companies don't care if they get the money now or they get it over a period of 2 years, but they're going to get their money. Now, with this regulation in place, our murderer would have had to come up with $10,000 because his bond was $100,000. The likelihood of him having that, or a normal individual having that just to drop, is very unlikely, right?
Well, the point is that you don't know.
We don't know.
The point is that we don't keep
know.
records of how much someone actually does have to put down
Right.
to get out. And that was part of the point of this.
Yes, so we need to lift the veil of privacy, and we are going to go before the bail bond board, and that's going to be the next step. Now that we implemented that minimum 10%, is to lift the veil of privacy between defendants and bail bond companies, because the victims deserve to know how much these people that took their loved ones' lives are paying to get out of jail, period. And that's going to create a paper trail to conflict and contradict if they're not doing what they said, that there's going to be something in writing saying, you said that he paid 10%. Can you show me which method he paid?
Right.
Cash,
Yeah.
card, credit, some kind of.
Well, and you know
paper
something too
trail.
that I think has changed, and I think you would agree with this. I mean, I was always under the impression that, okay, if it was some high bond, all right, I'm going to have to put my house or grandma's,
Yeah,
right,
you
there's
have
going to be
collateral.
collateral, and then if I hit the road, grandma's going to lose her house. I mean, right, I mean, isn't that kind of what
There
people
used to
always
be an
thought?
implied threat that you bond, they would forfeit in the bondsman would then have to fork over
Right,
the rest of the money, so they had an incentive in making sure that the person did return to court. Now it's much more easier just to revoke the bond and actually not go through the bond forfeiture process.
and the bond forfeiture process would be where the court actually would say, okay, Randy Wallace didn't show up and his bond was
You have X
$300,000.
amount of months to bring this person back to court,
Or
guess
cough
what?
up
You are
$300,000.
the one,
Yeah.
right? So there was an incentive to do that. But April, let me go back. So you're leading this idealistic life, right? Prior to your niece, and all of a sudden you're thrust into the news. You're appearing at commissioner's court, city council. You're meeting all these politicians, and some on a good way, and some in a not so good way that you
Yes.
find out that kind of used,
Yes.
the death of Arlene to kind of
Yes.
promote their own. So what's it been like for you in the last 3 or 4 months dealing with this?
It's been very difficult because you have this false sense of safety and security with the people that are supposed to be governing the city. And first and foremost, I believe that public safety was going to be the first thing in mind in everybody and for our elected officials, but that's just not the case. And I have reached out to everybody that will listen. Republican, Democrats, Independents, just alike. To me, that doesn't matter. Because I need everybody working together to back this, because this is a human rights issue. This is a human life issue. This is not a political issue.
That is so true. That's so
Were
true.
you surprised at some of the friction and why public safety
People don't want to hear it. People don't want this story to continue to be brought to light. And I have to say that I have never seen anybody besides Paul Castro, which I've been watching on the news for over a year now, with his advocacy. Prior to Paul, I had never seen anybody advocate for their family, and we learned a lot from Paul, right? Yeah. I will say something that happened at Commissioner's Court on 2/22. That was 3 days before Arlene was buried. They passed this resolution, right? And as I see something that I see happen so often now that I'm a part of it. And we didn't find out about this until a couple of weeks ago, right? And they passed this resolution for Arlene, but we were never contacted. None of these individuals showed up to the funeral. Nobody showed up to the vigil. Lina Hidalgo went ahead and she put that on her Twitter. But when I asked to meet with her, she declined. She would only have me meet with a lady named Samantha. And so I told Samantha, I'm like, you know what? I'm so sorry, but if the judge doesn't have time for us, then why am I meeting with you? You know?
Yeah.
What's the point? But the head of our city wasn't there for us. And she's a Hispanic, she's a female. I really thought that, and I think that a lot of the Hispanic community thinks like, oh, we have somebody in our corner. And I want you guys to know that's just not the case. Since then, now they just reached out to us yesterday. They wanted to speak. And I told them, you didn't have time for us then. It's been 4 months. Now we don't have time for you. And I am saddened to see that we didn't get the support that we needed, and nobody asked all the other elected officials to show up to a funeral, and yet they still did, from all over. People that we had zero communication with, that if they saw this is because they on their own researched it, because they showed up from Austin, and this was something that was happening here on our turf. And again, it's not an isolated incident. It keeps on happening to children, and it's a big issue here in Harris County.
Arlene basically became everybody's little girl.
Yeah, yeah, that's very true, yeah.
Absolutely, and we wish that wasn't the case. We wish that she was here to celebrate her 10th birthday, that she was here to celebrate getting out of school and going into summer. It's something that she was really looking forward to, and no family deserves this, but when I tell you that Armando and Wendy did not deserve this. They did not. I'm saddened to see the slander of Crime Stoppers, because nobody else has stood up for us. Nobody else has put forward the penny. Nobody else but Crime Stoppers. And I myself have had to go and defend Crime Stoppers on my own. And I am nobody. I am trying to figure out the system and navigate it.
Well, you must be somebody, because you actually had an elected official call you out of the blue.
Yes.
After kind of
a weekend. Gene Wu was having his way with Crime Stoppers, and it really upset me.
Yeah.
Because if you're not a part of something better or a solution, then you're a part of the problem. And I just don't believe that people should be behaving this way. It's just a juvenile fashion when you're in such an important position. Instead, we should be using that position to make change for the better. Right. So I questioned him on how many funerals have you been to?
Let's kind of go back a little bit for people who who hasn't been following there was sort of this little Twitter war of words, if you will, over the weekend. And State Representative Gene Wu, who we did a story on this last time, and we interviewed him, and he did apologize, but he's no fan of Crime Stoppers, to say the least.
And that's been ongoing for the last few years.
Right, yeah, I mean, he just doesn't care for Crime Stoppers.
I get that.
And right, that he can have his opinion about that. But then you tell it from here.
Yeah, so basically, he was trying to make a point, and I invited him to come speak to parents of murdered children and surviving family members of homicide. I've been on their board for 30 years. We meet here at Crime Stoppers the second Tuesday of every month from 7 to 9 p.m. And we invite elected officials of all parties.
All the
And
time.
actually, elected officials of all parties have been here.
Right.
Both Democrats and Republicans have spoken here. I was just shocked at his response, claiming that he wouldn't show up at any Republican, led event. And I just fired off. I said, wow, I had no idea Parents of Murdered Children was partisan. It's never, ever been. We don't discuss politics. These are families who lost loved ones to homicide, and we have other people that are here to help them answer their question. I was just stunned that an elected official would make such a juvenile and disparaging remark, and it just kind of took off from there. So other members of POMC, as we call them,
Paul Castro, whose
Other
17-year-old
people,
son David
Jessica,
was shot last July, last year.
he saw what was happening and just said, no, you cannot do that. And especially an elected official, you can't act like that. You can't accuse a support group for homicide survivors of being a partisan Republican-based group when it's the furthest thing from the truth. So there was a lot of,
Back and forth.
there were a lot, and there were a lot of people visibly upset, and rightfully so.
And you were one of those people that you were very upset.
I was really upset because these same people that are critiquing Crime Stoppers, and I will speak as well as the commissioner court, when they would have passed this resolution to honor Crime Stoppers, I think to myself, when have I seen these people at a funeral? When have I seen these people at a vigil? When have I seen these people really come through for families? They don't. They're not there for them. The only one that is here for us is Crime Stoppers, right? Oh, and they want to say, well, there is, an investigative piece. I've read the whole investigative piece, right? And it had nothing more dangerous or nothing more that I could think, oh my God, anything in comparison to what Linda Hidalgo is going through as far as being investigated, right? So when I compared the two, and I told her this, I'm like, wouldn't you say that everything about you in the news media isn't necessarily true? But yet she still continues to govern and make decisions over the city, even though she's being investigated by the Texas Rangers. So simply taking just a news piece media and running with it is not the correct thing to do. I think everybody needs to do their own homework. And if you just look back at the last few months, I can tell you that Sheila Jackson Lee has been here, Senator Whitmire has been here, Adrian Garcia has been here, and those are all hard Democrat folks, right? And we've all been here rubbing elbows with them, and I have seen Andy treat everybody with the utmost respect, and that's why I got upset. I was at the water park, and I took that phone right out of that little water pouch, and I made my video to Woo because I had no idea.
He called you, right?
Yeah, and he calls me after the fact, and he apologized, and he says that he's going to be more present. And I told him exactly, and I'm going to say it, Andy, I don't care if Andy and Rania start dating Governor Abbott. I do not care. I care about what they do when they go past those Crime Stoppers doors and they serve our community. And I'm one of those people that they continue to service. Never have they ever asked me what my views are, what I think, nothing. If anything, I have asked them because the voting time is here, and I feel like we have to vote different because the definition of insanity is to do the same thing and expect different results. So I know that I have to get out of my comfort zone to have something different here in Harris County.
Right, and I'm glad you brought that up because keep in mind, there's still a few hours to vote. If you haven't done that, use the power to vote. It's been very difficult for me to wrap my head around this whole thing because this was never, ever political at all. We started doing these reports to tell the public, to tell you, look at what's going on. Here's a defendant that's out on 12 bonds that's now accused of killing someone. It's a matter of public safety. It has nothing to do.
I think everybody has generally, who might have disagreed with what we were doing earlier, has now pretty much come aboard and has said the same thing that Crime Stoppers has been saying since 2019. And so it's kind of interesting to watch some of the progression. Yeah, of course, you got an election, so yeah, I'm a little bit cynical, but I would rather have everyone in agreement right now. So it's been a strange few months. Mm-hmm. Because we're sitting back here going, all we're doing is telling
what's going on.
It's court doc. Mm-hmm. And let me ask you, we've been doing these stories now for a couple of years, at least a year and a half on the breaking. Has anyone called you, contacted you to say that story was wrong?
No,
false?
no, not one judge has ever called up and said, defendant so-and-so is not out on 8 bonds, and this did not happen in my court, because it's factual, it's document-driven reporting. And the thing too, that when you look at you and I, for example, this is the 3rd time that we've sort of tackled a public safety issue. First, it was all the parolees running around, right? I mean, that was a huge problem in the late 90s. I mean,
Early
it was,
90s.
or yes,
Early
I'm sorry, early
90s.
90s. And then the next
We're not
thing
that
was,
old.
I don't know about that. And then it was mandatory release. I mean, it's like,
Right.
there's this documented history of you and I kind of focusing on a public safety issue and sort of acting like a dog with a bone. You know, we just don't
It's
let it go.
interesting. I go back and I look in the 90s and I look at some of the news reports that I've done and you've done. By the way, you look, I mean, we should show pictures.
I went through some scary looks.
It's proof that some people age better than others, and there's living proof of that. But
He pretty much looks the same to all of it, all of it.
So I'm looking at some of the stories that we did, and I remember we did stuff on dual supervision, people on parole and probation at the same time.
Yeah,
And we took on some of the judges.
yeah.
We took on some of the judges for some of the other decisions that were made, and they were all Republican judges
Right,
back
yes.
then. And I'm going, so for those that want to say, you know,
that now you're
I'm going, wait a
partisan.
second.
Yeah,
No, it's right here. It's documented. It doesn't matter who you are. We just point out things that we obviously are of the perspective that are wrong, and so many people that have paid the price
Yes.
from these decisions.
and on the surface, it looks nonsensical. It's like, why would you have somebody out on 14 bonds? Why would you have somebody out on parole and probation at the same time? And right, and it all kind of comes back to, it doesn't make a lot of sense. It seems nonsensical.
No, it doesn't make sense. And we're doing this at the expense of the public, you know, and I
Right.
truly believe that 95% of us here in this county do what we're supposed to do, and we live our life day to day, go to work, take kids to school. But then there's that 5%. And if we continue to give the other 5% second chances after second chances, you're doing that at the expense of public safety.
That's right.
Because
That's
it's just
right.
a small amount of people. Most people will commit a crime and won't ever do it again. But you have that small percentage that continue no matter what you do to them until you lock them up. They're not going to stop.
That's right. And just to clarify once again, there is no actual mandated felony bond reform. There was misdemeanor bond reform.
Yes.
And we've never had a problem with that. People that have committed non-violent crimes, misdemeanor in jail for 2 or 3 months when maybe they didn't do it, or maybe their whole life is going to crumble because.
We've never equated anything that we've done with misdemeanor bond.
No.
Right.
Flat out simple. We're very selective in the cases that we do end up profiling.
Right.
I mean, we look at everything.
And you guys are very generous. Y'all have a lot of criteria before y'all even.
Yes.
Right, yes, yes,
You
yeah,
are
that's right,
exactly
yes.
right. So if you're on one felony bond and charged with murder,
No,
They
we
don't
didn't
even
do-
talk
we didn't-
about
We didn't
that.
do it.
Yeah.
We
Can you
didn't
just
talk
imagine?
about it.
right, yeah,
Let me ask you, April, so all of a sudden, like I said, you're thrust into this
Mhm.
brand new world where it's kind of like learning a foreign language.
Absolutely.
Is how I
Yeah.
describe it. What's it been like for you? I mean, you obviously never, prior to February 14th, you probably said, I'm appearing before a commissioner's court. No, I'm
Right.
not doing that. So now all of a sudden, you're doing this and you're meeting a lot of, high-powered elected officials on this. What's it been like for you?
It's disappointing, and I'm going to tell you why. Because I am pushing with everything that I have to make a change today. Not tomorrow, not next year, not the year after that, not maybe after elections. I want it now. And I don't see that same momentum from the people that are elected to protect us, right? And so I'm pushing for people to show up for us and for the causes. So my next thing that I have on the agenda for the bail bond board is to lift the veil of privacy between defendants and bail bond companies as far as their transactions go, because victims deserve to know how much their murderers are paying to get out of jail. And again, that's only for the 17 offenses that we have covered, which covers all murders, manslaughters, sexual assault of a child or disabled person, aggravated robbery, so life-altering crimes. And I want to make that very clear. I'm not worried about the petty things. I don't believe that somebody should sit in jail for stealing some stuff at Walmart, right? We need to leave the jail open and available for people that are killing our people and that are altering their life permanently.
Right.
We hear a lot on the news about the people that perish, but we don't hear is about the people that survive with these life-altering injuries. They may not be able to work, they may not be able to sustain themselves, and now they're thrown into a whole different realm where they have to provide health care to themselves, and they need caregivers 24 hours a day. We don't even talk about those folks, but they are out there, and there's a lot of them here in Harris County. Ashanti Grant is one of them. She got shot in the head just like Arlene, and she's been in the hospital ever since that incident. She hasn't gotten out of the intensive care unit.
No one's been arrested in that case. Yeah.
No, nobody's been arrested in that case either. But we don't hear a lot about those kids and adults, Can you imagine not being able to sustain yourself for work?
Right.
And I've always said that, and that's always what's really bugged me, because I hear a lot of people testify it's going to cost so much and so much to keep people locked up. And I remember appearing at the legislature, and one of the representatives from Harris County Commissioners Court was talking about cost factors. And I got up there and I said, you know what I never hear anybody talk about? The cost of victimization.
Yes.
I never hear anyone talk about what it's going to cost for a family. Let's say they lose a loved one who was the breadwinner
Yes.
of the family. Now you don't have that.
No.
And no one talks about the guy working at a convenience store that's shot and now has to miss work and has years and years of medical expense. No one talks about the costs of victimization.
No, we
and that's
don't.
got to change.
It does. We need to look at crime from what's best for the criminal. We need to look at crime for what's going on with the victim. How is the victim affected by this? And we spoke about this at Bail Bond Board. We did not have the money to bury Arlene. I'm going to repeat that again. We did not have the money to bury Arlene. We buried Arlene through the kindness of Houstonians. Okay, if it wasn't for the donations, we wouldn't have been able to bury Arlene. A lot of people that don't get the media attention that we have gotten are genuinely left to only cremate their loved ones because that's the only thing they can afford.
Yeah.
And
Funerals
that's the
are
reality.
very expensive.
They really are.
It's,
And I want everybody to know that Arlene's grandparents on both sides are still living. We started burying our family with Arlene. And I just want everybody to know that we lived in a safer society where our grandparents and we got to the age that we are now because it was a safer place to live. Now so many children are perishing like never before. And if this many kids were dying during COVID, I don't believe that we would have said, well, okay, guys, I've already given you everything that I can. We'll see you next budget year. We wouldn't have acted that way. We treated COVID, we reanalyzed it and analyzed it week to week to week to week. And we changed our strategies to deal with the current times. And we're not treating crime that way. We're just kind of washing our hands of it and saying, we'll see you in next budget year and see what we can do. And it's very difficult for us because.
well, too, I do think that sometimes with elected officials, if it was their family, it would be a whole other thing. I mean, it's like sometimes you have to actually be touched by it to finally say, hey, this has got to stop.
If not touched by it, then shoved into it because we got
Right.
shoved into it, and I'm not going to stop showing up. I'm not going to stop showing the picture of Arlene deceased because people keep showing these pictures of smiling children at the peak of their happiness. That's not what the community needs to see. The community needs to see our dead children, and they need to see the images that we have to live with for the rest of our lives.
Reality is, Rod, do you remember when I met you and your family?
Yes.
And I came up to you guys and I said, Arlene is going to be a catalyst for change.
Yes.
And you're living proof of that.
Yeah.
So my hat's off to you.
Yeah. For someone that, you're, like you said, you never thought this was going to happen to your family. And you're at least, instead of just, sitting back, well, what can I do? You're trying to do stuff. You're trying to have your voice.
We're trying to do it. And I want everybody to know that if somebody gets killed right now they have to pay that 10% minimum, okay? So if something happens to your family today because of the changes that we implemented, now that individual is going to have a harder time to get out of jail. So if the judges do their job and they give a high enough bond, now the bail bond companies have to do their job and charge a 10% minimum on these 17 violent offenses, right? So as long as the judges are doing their part, like in our case, they kind of did. Of course, we would all love a $1 million bond, but that's just not going to happen. It's not
You know,
realistic.
we should do, because obviously, you know, you and I have talked about the upcoming legislative session, which,
Yes.
you know, obviously you're going to be at the Capitol, so I wonder if we could actually, a lot of times we name laws and bills. I wonder if we can name the pending legislation. I know that Senator Whitmire is filing. I wonder if we could just call it Arlene's
That
Law.
would be great.
I would love that, you know, and
We
you
can
know,
do that.
you guys
We've done this before.
I know a little bit about the Amber Alerts. That all goes back to Amber.
It's sad,
you
but we
know,
name a lot of legislation after dead kids. That's just reality.
I just
It's
wish
sad, but I
don't
think
wish
this would be a great.
upon anybody, but I wish it wasn't her.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, of course not. But
I
this
wish
is
it wasn't
yeah.
her, but this is all we have left. If we don't speak up for her, who else will?
You're right, right.
And now I'm getting to the point where I'm annoying people, and I'm going to continue to make
You're talking
everybody.
to two chief. You're
uncomfortable.
talking to
I'm
people
not
who.
going to stop showing up. I'm going to continue to make everybody uncomfortable, and I'm going to make everybody accountable, and I want everybody to work to the highest efficiency at their position. I'm tired of everybody sitting on their hands. There's too much happening in this community for us to say, hey, let's spend $53 million on bike trails. We don't have the luxury to do that.
We welcome you into
Yes.
the Annoying Club. You are now a vested.
Yeah, you are a force to be reckoned with, April. and that's great. And that's, I think if you look through history, I mean, how do things really change? You have people that it's like, I'm tired, I'm fed up, and I want to see change, and you just start rattling cages, and
Every cage is going to get rattled.
there you
There's a
go.
saying I've had for 30 some odd years. Anybody can yell and scream about the injustice of the world. I would much prefer to find a solution and or a remedy.
That's
Yes.
right, that's right,
And that's
yes.
what we're after, you know.
Yes.
So everybody who has critiqued Crime Stopper, unless you're doing a quarter of what Crime Stoppers does to victims, I'm gonna say this as politely as I can, shut up. And this comes from the victims' families. Nobody else wants to open those wallets. The way those Twitter fingers move just as fast, I wish those Zelle fingers would move just as fast to make a donation, and if any family's honor, not just mine, to try to catch the murderers that are taking our families and loved ones. Do something. So if you're not doing anything for crime victims' families, shut your mouth.
And remember too, again, whoever would have been at that spot, at that moment, it would
Would've
have
gotten
been,
the
their
bus.
family would be going through what your
Yes.
family went through. It wasn't like you were in some, seedy part of town, or,
Yep.
you know what I mean? It was just going to
Driving
get
to
pizza. I mean,
Spanky's,
yeah.
driving to Spanky's, y'all. And there were 6 bullets shot at the vehicle. And the vehicle, a lot of people don't know this, was actually disabled because of it hit the gas tank, but it's a diesel truck.
Yeah.
We always wonder what would have happened if it was a gas truck, if it would have caught on fire,
yeah.
or more people would have perished. And it's very sad that in this society, if somebody shoots into your vehicle and kills your daughter under the age of 10, they'll be out in 22 hours. And it could take up to 3 years for them to face trial. Grasp that. Josue Flores, 6 years. Jasmine Barnes, 4 years. And you've seen Paul Castro, he's going on 1.5 years, okay? And now you have us. And the DA is telling us it could take up to 3 years for us to face the music. Grasp that, Houston. That is unacceptable.
It sure is. We want you to come back sometime, okay?
I will.
It was great having you. Thank you so much for watching, and be sure to watch tonight's Breaking Bond on tonight's 9 p.m. newscast. Say goodbye.
See you.
Thanks for joining us.